means they're going to get steadily worse, and we have to keep stepping up on fighting climate change too. One of the ways we define ourselves most easily is, well, we're not American.
Strengthening trade ties could be a win-win solution for Canada and the U.S.
There are a lot of feelings involved. I mean, if you look, we do better when we work together to take on the world, whether it's China or Russia or anywhere else. When we work together.
Grounded TV. We're going to jump right into the Trudeau CNN interview coming right up here, guys.
Justin Trudeau, thank you so much for being here.
I'm glad to be here, Jay.
Really appreciate it. Before I get into the funeral and before I get into what's going on with you back in your home country, I do want to ask, our country and the world really is watching these horrible fires in Los Angeles. Canada has a lot of experience with similar conflagrations. I know that you have been offering resources to the people of California and Los Angeles. What advice could you offer them?
Well, I think unfortunately over the past years we've seen it get far worse, and we've seen wildfires increasingly encroaching on urban areas, and that's an interface fire where we're having to train up more
Afternoon, Jose.
Local municipal firefighters to deal with wildfires in a way that we never had before. I've been back and forth texting with Governor Newsom. We've offered a tremendous amount of equipment that they're already accepting. There's expertise. There's things that we're having to do to deal with together as we, of course, respond to these fires, but also know that climate change means they're going to get steadily worse, and we have to keep stepping up on fighting climate change too.
But a lot of people out there might say, what does climate change have to do with this? Explain.
Well, when the summers get drier, when weather gets hotter, when weather patterns shift, communities that were built in a place that never saw fires are suddenly seeing fires much more frequently. There's a shift in everything that means even what we see now is going to just get worse and worse and worse over the coming decades if we're not serious about reducing our emissions and looking for ways to protect our future generations.
So you are here in Washington, D.C., even though you just stepped down as your party's leader and you will soon leave as prime minister.
Yeah, and you didn't go on any Canadian media tour at all. You basically just hid the whole time, and no one even. I didn't know he went to the U.S. Did you guys know Trudeau left the country? Did you guys know that? I didn't know.
Minister, but why was it important for you to come here to Washington today to go to President Jimmy Carter's funeral?
Well, President Carter was a dear friend of my father's. They overlapped in their times of service, and Jimmy had been down at my father's after my father's funeral 25 years ago. He was always an inspiration to me in terms of compassionate, selfless leadership, and it was important for me, and I think it was important for the friendship between our countries that the Prime Minister be there to represent.
President-elect Trump has been needling you a bit, calling you Governor Trudeau, talking about making Canada the 51st state. Did you have any interaction with him today?
No, not today.
See, I feel like they did invite him on. Don't get me wrong. I feel like they reached out to him because they want to push back on Trump's 51st state rhetoric, I feel like, and this is their way into doing that at CNN.
But that's not going to happen. Canadians are incredibly proud of being Canadian. One of the ways we define ourselves most easily is, well, we're not American. There is such a depth of pride that's not actually an issue. What I think is happening in this is President Trump, who's a very skillful negotiator, is getting people to be somewhat distracted by that conversation, to take away from the conversation around 25% tariffs on oil and gas and electricity and steel and aluminum and lumber and concrete, and everything the American consumers buy from Canada is suddenly going to get a lot more expensive if he moves forward on these tariffs. And that's something that I think we need to be focusing on a little bit more.
Did the re-election of Donald Trump and this more direct confrontation with Canada over this issue play any role at all in your decision to resign as leader of your party and prime minister?
No.
I think it definitely did. See, I watched this last night, 4 hours after it aired, just kind of wanted to do a bit more of a different style where I instead of a first time reaction, I'm doing more of a breakdown here. So when he gets to this question here, I just feel like he is quickly trying to cover up. That's it's probably not the sole reason. Don't get me wrong. I'm not going to say Trump is the sole reason he resigned, but I definitely think Trump took that pressure cooker and he amped up the temperature quite a bit. And I think that kind of just pushed the inevitable to happen, something that had been put off for a long time that we all knew was going to happen eventually. And most people didn't think he could cling on till October. And I think we were right. You know, it was the same thing. Biden did not have 4 more years, you know, because it was pretty obvious at the time, but there was a lot of people who didn't want to admit it.
On the contrary, what we were able to do during the first presidency of Mr. Trump's was work together in a very challenging situation to come out with a very strong win-win in Canada-U.S. relations with the renegotiation of the USMCA. It is a great deal for both of our countries.
Like, he's not wrong by saying we need a win-win deal. Like, when I first heard them saying this, I was Christopher Freeland, and they're like, we're the Canada-U.S. relations team, and we're Team Canada, but we're only liberals. Basically, like, when they first said this win-win thing, it made me think of like Michael Scott from The Office, just going like, we need a win-lose, or you can take a win-win, or a lose-lose, or we can do a win-lose, like that whole bit he does from one of the early episodes. Anyways, that's what reminds him when he starts rambling like this. However, he's not wrong in saying we need a win-win solution. And that is, I guess, what Doug Ford is also saying with this new energy alliance proposal, right? This idea of strengthening trade ties could be a win-win solution for Canada and the U.S. I just don't think that the Liberals have the credibility and the, the nerve and backbone to actually reach a positive win-win deal. And I think that's kind of the problem where they're falling short of here.
We've seen trade grow, we've seen opportunities grow, we've seen wealth grow in both of our countries for workers, for businesses. Working together concretely is something that we've been able to do in the past, and I'm looking forward to continuing to work with him for the next 2 months while I'm still in office.
Let's talk about this potential 25% tariff from the United States on Canada. Economists say that will drive the Canadian economy into a recession, and the Canadian government is preparing retaliatory tariffs if these actually go through. Which do you think would be potentially the most effective against the United States? I don't want them, by the way, just as an American, I don't want these tariffs. But
I don't even think, I don't think anybody really wants these tariffs, like especially for Canada and U.S. tariffs. Like, those are like the most detrimental to the American economy as well, I believe, or to Americans.
Energy?
We don't want them either. We do not want to see tariffs on our side. We do not want to see tariffs on your side. It's bad for people who have, for generations, made things together and been successful together to actually start creating barriers between economies like ours. Like, we have so many resources in Canada, more than our market can support. So we export them to our closest friend who can rely on them. It is a win-win for us. We would definitely respond, as we did years ago when President Trump put tariffs on steel and aluminum. We responded by putting tariffs on Heinz ketchup, on playing cards, on bourbon, on Harley Davidsons, on things that would hurt American workers. But we don't want to do that because it drives up prices for Canadians and it harms our closest trading partner.
Is there nothing that Donald Trump is saying about trade status and relations right now where you think that he has a point? There's nothing you think that is unfair?
I mean, the conversation around tariffs started around border concerns. And what I spoke with him about in Mar-a-Lago was the fact that less than 1% of migrants into the United States, less than 1% of fentanyl into the United States comes from Canada. But there are absolutely more things we can do. And
you pledged $1 billion to enhance borders.
I guess the growing concern is coming more from our national security, how there's multiple essentially known wanted terrorists that have been caught sneaking from Canada into the U.S. And the only thing that actually was able to catch them was the U.S. border. You know what I mean? So it's and a lot of that also has to do is the U.S. is communicating with other countries to find out who is on these terrorist lists, where apparently Canada is not really pulling their weight in that area either. So it's another area where we are a bit of a security concern for the U.S. And I don't blame them for that. I don't think the solution is annexing Canada. However, I do believe that we could reach a positive solution, a win-win solution, as everyone else likes to put it, together. But I don't think this is the guy or any other liberal who's going to be able to negotiate that. You know what I mean? So I feel like after watching Pierre's press conference yesterday, even Saul admits he thinks that he's got the salt to get us a good deal compared to what Trudeau could achieve, because Trudeau just slaps the knee pads on, and Polyev likes to talk about that large, super loud sucking sound. We all know where that came from.
We're strengthening. That's a clear win for President Trump that got us to do even more to reduce even further the minimal amounts coming in. On trade, there's more that we can do, but we should be focused on making sure that we're replacing Chinese lithium or Chinese germanium or Russian titanium into American productions by relying on your closest and friendliest trading partner in Canada. We can be a strong supplier of things that the U.S. needs to compete around the world because we can do it together. That's the argument that I'm making.
So the struggle that you were having domestically, your disapproval rating had to do with, as I understand
like
it,
struggle is an understatement. It's more like just dumpster fire chaos. Like, it's going to make the history books in terms of chaotic resignations. And not to mention, he's currently holding the title, I think, for worst prime minister in Canadian history in terms of economic growth underneath him. You could argue that, well, it's because of, what happened in 2020, but I believe there were other prime ministers that went through worse economic disasters that were able to recover better than he was. The fact we're still even talking about recovering from 2020 is insane.
Discontent with your government because of high inflation and the economy, and also because of immigration policies. Those are also issues that the left-wing party in this country has faced a lot of disapproval of and just lost an election over. It seems like voters in both of these, liberal democracies are sending a message to left-wing parties, liberal parties. We don't like how you're doing the economy when it comes to inflation. We don't like how you're doing immigration.
There are a lot of feelings involved. I mean, if you look at the actual numbers.
So, guys, do you feel like that all our problems are just because there's a lot of feelings involved? Because when I heard this, I was like, what is wrong with you? Like, why is this the angle? Even if that's what you believe, like, you're a politician, I assume you probably lie. Why would you sell it like that? You know what I mean? Like, it's not like a car salesman who's trying to sell you a bad car is going to come out and say, it's a pretty bad car. You don't want this car. It's a piece of crap and it's overpriced. Don't worry about it. Doing you a favor. You don't need it. That's basically like, the idea that it's just all based on feelings. Like, what? Like, what? Like, that's what you're going with? It's just crazy.
Inflation in Canada was lower, came down quicker. Our economy bounced back faster after the pandemic than anyone else's, including the United States. We're projected to grow faster than the United States and all other G7 countries next year. Our economy...
We are not projected to grow faster than the United States. Like, we're not. Like, I'll say that right now. Like, no country is
doing very well. But when someone's paying $8 for a head of lettuce.
I guess maybe percentage wise, maybe they are, but in terms of numbers, like, they're not seeing the same numbers at all. I know that certain countries that you wouldn't expect are doing incredibly well right now, like Indonesia. They're going through what like America went through in the 1960s, like this like boomer, this huge population boom, economic boom. They're having a pretty good time apparently.
It doesn't matter that you're doing better than they are in Spain or somewhere else. There's a sense that, okay, something's got to give. And that's where incumbents are in trouble everywhere across everywhere around the world, not just in our two countries. The issue, though, is that in a time of crisis...
And this is what Saul has been talking about, is saying that this is a part of the factor of why his popularity is so low, is not only is he bad, however, there's this other, people are sick and tired of him. It's almost like he's reached his expiration date at the same time being the worst prime minister there's ever been. And at the same time, instead of just having some humility or humanity and taking some responsibility, he just gaslights everything and everyone around him and makes himself some victim that couldn't just do the job because of the big mean bullies that got in the way, like Pierre Poilievre.
Responsible politics is around focusing on things that actually make a real difference in people's lives. We delivered $10 a day childcare. We're delivering a dental care program that provides free dental care to people who don't have coverage. We're moving forward on putting a price on pollution that puts more money in the pockets of 8 out of 10 Canadians, of middle-class Canadians. These are policies that are not short-term. They're policies that will have a deep impact in the well-being of Canadians and of our country for years to come. Now, you can take those policies, like a childcare policy, and say, oh, see, that's just about wokeness and about, women's rights. Well, no, it's about getting more women into the workforce at a time where...
Okay, I never took it as that at all. I took it as, economic economic incentive for people to have, or to make the economic burden of children easier to incentivize population growth is what I thought it was for. To me, that makes sense. It's like you want people to have more kids. If that's one area you want to focus on with social support, I think is getting people to have more kids is a really good start. You know what I mean? Like that will help. And I think one of the biggest problems is that people are afraid to have kids because of economic situations, because of they can barely afford to feed themselves or the kids they already have. Why would they want to have more? You know what I mean? They're not going to be able to. And it's just funny because you guys ever watched the movie Idiocracy? It was done by Mike Judge, the guy did King of the Hill, like way back when. And it was about them going to the future and stuff. And it was like all the people who are dumber and more lower class kept having more kids constantly, and all the wealthier people just would only have one kid, maybe two, and just kind of slowly stopped having kids, right? And then over time, people just become dumber, I guess is the joke. But it has some kind of truth to it, is that like you see the situation we're in now where people are just having less and less kids. And it's not just the West, like it's happening in countries like Japan and I think Korea and a bunch of other countries around the world right now are having the same issue. Spain, Italy, all of them.
We need economic growth. That's what it is. But when you get I was going to say conflagration, but at least an intersection of both right-wing policy, right-wing attacks and social media, you end up with a lot of misinformation, disinformation, and responsible governments have to stay focused on the policy.
Why don't you just say, I feel people are misinformed? Not, you end up with a lot of misinformation and disinformation and maybe some malinformation in there too. It just sounds stupid and people will just tune you out. Like it does trigger me. Those are my trigger words. If anyone says I have some trigger words, saying misinformation or misinformed, whatever. Saying misinformation, disinformation, malinformation, like listing them all off. I'm just like, who are you trying to please here? Who are you doing this for?
That are making a difference, and that's what we've been doing.
I know you have to go. Before you go, I know you're not going to say who you want to succeed you, but whether it's Wayne Gretzky or Christina Friedland, what's your number one piece of advice for your successor when it comes to President Trump?
Understand that the win-win is what we need. Making sure that everyone understands that we do better when we work together, that yes, the American president has a capacity to hurt the Canadian economy. There's no question about that. But anything an American president does to hurt the Canadian economy will also hurt American consumers, American workers, and American growth. We do better when we work together to take on the world, whether it's China or Russia or anywhere else. When we work together, we can't be stopped. And that's the focus that we need to have. And that's certainly what I've continued to work on with President Trump.
Prime Minister.
And it's funny because as bad as this interview was, the last statement he made just there, I actually agree with, is that together with the United States is how we're going to survive and grow and thrive in the next century. And I think we all need to get onto that page. I think even America is on that page. It's just, how are we going to get to that agreement is another story. Seeing how unpopular this guy is, even in the U.S., I wonder if Trump is just playing these games because he's leader, because he just doesn't want the political association. I don't know. I don't know if that's part of it or if it's part of just Trump's image to be, to push guys like Trudeau around and not put up with their WEF agendas. I don't know. However, I think that we do kind of, we're on the precipice of a new horizon here. We're about to see something new emerge we haven't seen before. I feel it. And I feel like this guy's not going to be the guy in charge when we get to that point. And I hope it's peaceful and it's a win-win solution like everybody keeps talking about. We don't have to resort to this economic mud throwing match just to, between leaders at the expense of the Canadian and American people. It just seems silly. It's like Game of Thrones, right? It's like the only people who actually suffer are the common folk, right? The people who are everyday Joes are the ones who are going to suffer. And that's where I think it's just, it sucks, right? We're caught between their games. And that's what I see this economic war as. Whether or not you like Trump or not, I just think that it's not getting fun. It's not funny anymore because it's getting serious, and we're all gonna suffer. I think it looks like because of what Trudeau has done, and with the prorogation, we're going to be seeing these tariffs come into effect for a short period of time at the least, and it's not going to be fun. I think it's going to be a bumpy ride, guys. I think so.